Welcome to My Modern Myth, where we believe you own three things in this life: your mind, your body, and your story. And the way you use your mind and body writes that life story. So let's talk about how to write the best life story possible. And this is a Rest Rounds edition where we're talking a lot more about Jiu-Jitsu. It's a special edition because it's the 1 year reflection. The whole concept of Jiu-Jitsu for me is roll, reflect, and repeat. And this is how mind and body help me fast track my life story writing, how I have been dealing with so many lessons that only sport can teach in the way that it teaches it, which is why everyone I coach, I want them moving their body as much as they're moving their mind. So we're going to get into what I've learned this first year of Jiu-Jitsu, some key takeaways that are going to be mostly, let me take a look. Yeah, pretty much all related to how they enhanced my life, how this year has enhanced my life and wouldn't have been possible without Jiu-Jitsu, and the way I used Jiu-Jitsu. And maybe that can help you if you want to get into a sport like that, make a different connection with it, which will be, I think, one of the first two items is about connection and getting what you want out of it. But before I do that, I did want to let you know that December 15th at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, I'm going to be hosting my first of many webinars, workshops, whatever you want to call an online Zoom meeting to talk about my modern myth concepts, to build a community with you. It's going to be framed around what I call a life log line, which in movies, a log line is a 1 to 2 sentence summary of what happens in the story, the script, before someone is going to read it, or if they even decide to read it. And they're very basic, but they talk about where the person, the main character in the story starts, what they're facing, why they need to overcome it, and how they do. When applied to our lives, we can start to learn the narratives that have been driving our lives to this point on an unconscious level. We can make them conscious, and we can decide how to utilize them and craft new ones going forward. So it's the introduction to goal setting in certain ways by dealing with your inner critic, by the dialogue that runs in your mind, the story you've been writing. And you can summarize it, look at it in a snapshot, and then decide what you want to do going forward. So it's all dedicated to that. It's about an hour. It's free. There is a donation-based system that if you want to support the efforts that I'm putting out there, please feel free to do so. I'll be putting out a PayPal link at the course, and it's up to you if you want to do it. Otherwise, this is just all about connection. So feel no obligation just to show up and not donate any money. It's fine. Number one, I got this t-shirt. That's takeaway number one. I got it last night. November 17th is my 1 year mark. And I have made friends. I have made progress in fitness. I have made progress in my jiu-jitsu. And this t-shirt, as tongue-in-cheek as it is going to be one of the cool representations of what I really got out of my first year. And I got what I wanted: consistent connection. So that's two things. You do get what you want out of it if you take that mindset to it. If you are an ultra competitor, you're going to go to a gym and you're going to become that competitor if you bring that energy every day that you go to class. If you just want a way to get mobile and move your body and be active, you're going to get that out of it if you want. If you want progress, if you want belt ranks, you want friendship, whatever it is that you want, you have to be the one who goes and gets it. If you're at the gym that doesn't support that vision, you have to go to another gym. You are the arbiter of your own journey, and connection with this sport is a big one. If I would have stayed going the way I was when I started, which was just keep up with the young guys, I probably wouldn't have lasted. I almost did quit. The first 3 months of that journey was me figuring out how to stay, which isn't a bad thing. I think it's a good thing when we go somewhere and we want to stay so badly, we want to make it work, that we finally get that mindset shift that says, okay, the way I'm doing it isn't working. I'm in pain that I'm not feeling like is great to overcome. Like I need to rehab and stay off the mats. That sucks. But addressing that reality is reality. It's not an excuse. It's a reality. And you have to decide what you're going to do about that reality, to circumvent it, to go over it, to accept it and leave. But the reason you leave has to be for the right reason. It's not your coach's responsibility. It's not your training partner's responsibility. It's not your spouse's responsibility. It's your responsibility to determine these barriers and restrictions and decide what you're going to do about them. And if you want to stay, it is your sole responsibility to find out and figure out how. That's through opening yourself up. I did talk to people. I looked and researched and tried to figure it out. I even took time off, a couple of weeks, 3 weeks once, and then came back and my body felt fresh, and then immediately pain again. And then I realized how I thought it wasn't going too hard, but I was. It was on me, nobody else. So, that reality has been one of the biggest takeaways. I am the arbiter of this journey, and what I want out of it initially, was to be a high level competitor or to be a champion or to make black belt in 6 years. There's all these random meaningless goals that might pop up in the mind. And I had some of those feelings, but they're tempered with some reality. But through that process, I realized what I want is consistent connection. That's what I didn't have when COVID happened. I didn't even realize until it happened how much I did rely on social engagement. I thought it would be fine. Like, well, I don't really go out and do anything anyway. But when that was restricted, it did matter. So consistent connection with people and with things is what I needed. And that's what I found. The greatest takeaway is getting out, meeting new people and talking to them and realizing it's okay and allowing who I am fundamentally to come out. And we all have fundamental bits of who we are. They say people don't change. Well, they do change in a way, but they don't. We all have a fundamental way of being, a fundamental quality or qualities that make up who we are. But then the world and experience put stuff on top of it, and we become reactive and we become a different version of it. But beneath all of that, if we're able to get rid of those things, the fundamental bit of who we are does not change. I am a sensitive guy. I'm a compassionate. I'm a deep feeler. Like, I see things that no one else sees. I feel things no one else feels, and I can make sense of things by connecting random things and then help people make sense of that when I'm conversing with them. I have certain traits that are part of me. Humor is one of those things. Those are fundamental bits of who I am, and no matter where I go, they're always with me. And on top of all of that fundamental bits of who I am, I get reactivity, I get depression, I get rage, I get volatility, I get greediness, I get selfishness, I get lazy. All of those things are not fundamentally who I am, but they are stacked on top of that fundamental being that is me. And jiu-jitsu really helped me continue to strip away that stuff so I can get to the core of who I am and understand that. And understand that that's the goal for every one of us here, is to understand who you are fundamentally and then be that. That is the only requirement we have in this life beyond the basic need to sustain life. And when you simplify that, there's peace, there's freedom in that. That all you have to do is show up as who you are, figure out who you are, and then show up. Very complicated, but it's very simple when you break it down to that level and you understand that fundamentally you're a good person. You've just been hurt, you've been confused, you've tried to figure out this chaotic life on your own, and you've made key decisions, even in childhood, that you didn't even know you made, that are directing your life, and you're calling it fate. So that consistent connection with people who are like-minded on the same path as you is vital, because they are chasing the same thing that you're chasing. And that is growth. And it might be different growth. It might be to become a champion, but you can learn from those people too. And going somewhere once, twice, 3, 4 times a week where you're meeting these people, that's a rare thing today. It's outside of going to the bars, a sporting event or school or work. You're not really having consistent face-to-face connection with people who are friends, who are peers, and hopefully allies are going to be found in that. And one of those lessons that I've learned is the difference between peers and allies. Both good things to have in your life, but you need allies, because the allies are going to link arms with you and charge forward, where a peer is going to be there for you. It's going to be laughter. It's going to be fun. It's good times, but they're not going to challenge you to progress. They're not going to challenge you to grow, and they will be happy to commiserate, because they're just trying to create a connected environment, which connection will settle for if we can't get love. And the ally provides love, which is just a dedication to your spiritual development, as well as they're dedicated to their own spiritual development. And that doesn't necessarily mean religion. That just means growth. So yeah, this t-shirt is from one of my allies, and he gave it to me last night at one of our coffee meetups, which was important to me to establish that, yes, training is great, but as almost 40-year-old at the time, I wanted more connection with people who wanted to talk life, who wanted to dig in and get deep. And I love superficial, lighthearted conversation, but I also need depth. I crave it. I want to get in there and figure some things out and think critically. I want to connect and learn about people while they want to learn about me. Like, that's the dynamic that I chase, that I need, I should say, and found with some of the guys at Freeform, my gym. And I really appreciate that ability. And I know there's more out there. And I hope to help change that culture where those people can identify themselves and find some place to fit in. Because I mean, when you go to jiu-jitsu, it's heady. Like there's a lot of thought process involved in it. And so to have that mindset of just a dog, bowl your way through it, I think only gets you so far without that heart connected with it. That's why I love jiu-jitsu, is you really do need both to have a sustainable life practice. Number 2 is I got 2 silver medals from a competition. I went to one competition about 6 months into my training, and I got second place in gi and no gi, and felt very good about that. I went alone and had an amazing experience. There were so many emotions. And I think one of the best things about sport in general is the arena that you train in. It's fantastic. But being able to go test yourself against strangers in a highly competitive environment, it's a totally different experience. You're going to feel different things. And it's important to have that diversity. Maybe you're not competing every month. Maybe it's once or twice a year, but I feel there's a lot of value in exposing yourself to that element. And I never really saw myself as someone who could podium anything. I mean, I created a nonprofit with my friend Eric Hill, and he's an elite cyclist, professional level cyclist. And we had a pro level team, we still do, that's competing internationally. And is one of the top teams in the country. And then here I am. I can't even compete at a local event on a bike. Like I am not even close. And then so I go to jiu-jitsu where I'm a little bit more inclined to do better just because of my history. And I still don't think I can win. I don't believe that, that I could still be at a podium or beat anyone or anything like that. And then you start to go train and you're like, I could figure this out. Like there's some intuitive things that make sense to me where I could go to a competition and maybe do okay. And if I don't, I'm still doing it, right? And so I did. I signed up and I went for it and got second place. And I remember winning the semifinals match in both of those duvisions and feeling almost shocked in the best way possible. And then walking up to my finals match, both times, the scoreboard says semifinal and it says final, and it has your name there. And that was special. And I think every moment can be special if you want it to be. Certainly every moment will not be special because that would dilute the special. But this was a special one. And I took a moment very briefly to acknowledge that. Like I'm stepping onto the mat for the finals. I'm going to walk away with gold or silver. And both times I met the same competitor, very good for my skill level, beat me very quickly in no-gi, which I had only trained once. But gi, I had it within my ability to win. And I was foolish and gave away the match because I had control, I had points, and then I went for an armbar, which I had not trained. Oops. and we got into a scramble and I got guillotined like that. But I lost that match and I laughed because I knew what I did. I knew it. And it wasn't a huge life-changing experience where if I would have won that, I would have gotten $1 million and I would have got, there was nothing on the line really. It was all what was going on in here. Is this good for my mind? What is changing in my body? These were the questions that I needed to answer. And those were the wins. Those were the gold medals, the silver, they were the win. But walking and getting my silver medal, I didn't take that for granted either. And then I talked to my friends and they were so happy. And that almost made me feel more joy than the medal. To have connected allies that rallied and were just so excited for me. And that's why team is important. That's why relationship is important, because these allies are going to be able to reflect positive things, memories, moments, laughter, inspiration with you, whether you win or you lose. Left alone, it's just up to you. And that's ultimately what we all have to rely on, is our ability to have the conversation with ourselves. But when we have those allies, it matters, because I called my co-founder, my friend Eric Hill, and he answered the phone because he knew I got second. Thanks, Instagram. And he said, "Hey, champ." And I've never been called a champion, and I still didn't receive it. I said, "Well, yeah, I didn't win. I got second." And he said, "Well, you're a champion. Did you beat people? Did you get on the podium?" I said, "Yeah." "Well, then you're a champion." And at that moment, I felt that weird shift in saying, Why does champion have to be only the person that wins? Can't we be champions if we show up and are thriving, but maybe fell a little bit short of the result? Like this perfection myth, I don't believe we can ascribe to that standard that says if you're not perfect, you're not the champion, because the champion is like, it's a spirit that happens to be reflected by a medal or a podium or some kind of result. But the champion spirit is not removed because he lost this day. The champion is a champion every day. He gets up and moves forward and chooses growth, leans into adversity. The same as the hero. The hero isn't a hero because he survived some traumatic event on the worst day of his life. Because there's some people, if we use that logic, we'll never be able to decide if they are a hero or not, because they are never going to be put in that situation. So I like to look at the qualities of a hero, of a champion now. And to be the hero or the champion of your story, you have to lean into adversity. You have to choose to go forward in discomfort. And you have to understand that you need to go where you need to go, not where you want to go. And that leads to those adversities, to those discomforts, to those potential failures and failures. So if you're doing those things and you're a hero, you're a champion. And Jiu-Jitsu taught me that. And my friends reflected that. And Jiu-Jitsu gave me that example to which my allies and my friends could then reflect and help make that connection, to see myself in a different light and to conjure a different energy, which allows me to live more fully from my fundamental personality, fundamentally who I am. On that note, number 3 is a desire to meet failure. This doesn't mean I want to fail. This means that over this last year, I've recognized and finally fully understand, because it's been in my face for so long, that failure is vital to growth. It is one of the most important ingredients, because if you're going to fail and grow forward, you have to keep trying. If the first time you go out and try something after you learn it, you fail and you decide that's your line in the sand that you quit, then you did fail. Failing something in a moment is just highlighting that you don't have it yet. Your brain isn't wired that way. So you need repetition. You need to continue to fail. You need to try things. And then your brain and body connect and they have a conversation that starts to bring new pathways to become newly aware of certain things. One of the things that I have to fail over and over is getting guillotined, and I hate it. But my neck position is still not where it needs to be, because occasionally I do get caught. But every time I do, my brain's making a connection. It's saying, when this is present, when you're doing this, you've got to watch out for this, so don't do it. Now, I'm not thinking that consciously all the time, but eventually it gets to a point where you don't have to, because your body just knows, because you've been through the situation enough that to create safety, to preserve life, your brain had to make a body connection, because the stimulus that's coming at you is so consistent and the failure is so consistent that to be safe, to create homeostasis, we have to figure this out, because apparently Eric's fighting now. And now we actually have to figure some things out, that if you're touched here, and it's also this element of good touch, bad touch. There was traumas in my past where it was bad touch, and there's reactivity there. I used to not be able to hold my wife's hand because I felt trapped, or the heat felt trapped, or my legs felt trapped. And that was a lack of my ability to commit to intimacy. It prevented me from that in certain ways. And that was rooted in unresolved trauma from my childhood, from being abused by people outside my family, by men, and that conflating of intimacy and domination. And so simple things like pressure felt like domination, and I've melted away into panic. Jiu-Jitsu is pressure, and I will not lie to you. There have been moments in training that I have been near tears, not because anything bad happened, but because the pressure I felt made me feel like a kid again. It made me feel that panic of the child who's being harmed. But I've done a lot of work, and I've gotten to a place where I'm aware that nothing is happening, that this is something that lives in my body and is trying to become known to me so that I can finally process it. And in jiu-jitsu, you're safe. Now, I'm not going to sit here and have a breakdown on the mats and cry and do all this stuff, but I've done the work beforehand. This is just the finishing work. And so when I go home after feeling that trap, that feeling of wanting to quit and just let it be over, allowed me to feel things that I haven't felt in a long time in ways I haven't felt them, because traumas are anything that disturb you. And when you resolve it, you haven't resolved all of it. and life gives you opportunities to be triggered in ways for you to continue to resolve it. Because until it's fully resolved, there's always going to be a level of reactivity that sits on top of it to prevent you from going there. Because to be vulnerable like that doesn't feel safe, even though it's necessary. I mean, that's kind of what depression is sort of allowing me to try and experience, is to slow down, stop, and feel it. That's a whole different conversation, but that is part of it. But meeting that failure allows me to acquire skill, but it also allows me to deal with some unresolved things, unresolved feelings, and to understand what discomfort is and how to navigate it, how to not tap out because it's uncomfortable, but to wait. Let me see if I'm really in danger here. Huge lesson that I took away from that early and often is this lesson of what is safe, what is not safe. When is it asthma and when is it just panic because you're under pressure? And on that line, number 4 is a weekly way to challenge my mind and body. Mind, body, story. If you can find an arena that challenges both the mind and the body and you like it, stay there, because that's huge. When you can wire yourself to be challenged in both ways at the same time, reading doesn't do it for me. It does challenge my mind, so it's a vital piece of what I do. Weightlifting doesn't often challenge my mind, but occasionally it's taught me some things, but it's still vital to do. But if you find something that is causing you to have to think, react, and do so physically, that's a good recipe. And doing it consistently 2 times a week is my goal. I'm happy with that. It's what I can do, and I'm not trying to be an elite athlete in a record amount of time. So that realization, that acceptance, and it's for a good reason. It's not because I don't want to try. Because I've learned where my limits are at 40, and I'm obeying them. I'm listening to them, but working with them, trying to push it a little bit, and being able to go twice a week is it for me right now. That's cool. I'm happy with that. But the fact is that it's weekly. I get to go do this. And that's the key, is consistency. Like I said before, and I'll say it again, consistency is so important because that's the only way we can continue to grow. That's the only way we can craft the story, is by continually putting pen to paper, by continually putting ourselves in environments that are ripe for growth. And number 5 is a compression of my life into a very small window. Jiu-Jitsu and other sport have ways of compressing your life into a moment because it mirrors certain stressors in life and it shows you how you react to them. And when we understand this, we can start to see how when we do one thing, we do all things, and start to learn those little lessons of like, when do I quit? When do I think things are getting too hard? What do I avoid? What am I avoiding? Am I waiting to the last minute to address a problem, or am I seeing the problem coming and doing something to adjust out of it? If I'm waiting to be armbarred before I start to move and try to escape, where else am I doing that in life? Where am I waiting for the chaos to get so big and the problem to get so big that I'm reacting through spazzing and just hope? What signs are there that I could have seen before it got to that point? And jiu-jitsu isn't life, but it shows that if you can do it in jiu-jitsu on the mats, you can do it in your life. So it changes the way you see life because it shows you that compressed version of it. When things get too hard, when they get really uncomfortable, I want to bail. Okay, so what happens if I stay for 5 more seconds before I bail? That was one of the first things I did, was when I wanted to tap to pressure, because I had that panic. I recognized it was panic and I said 5 more seconds. You can tap in 5 seconds if it's bad. And in that 5 seconds, I realized, or I could look for space and create space and find my breath. And I created space and I didn't tap. Where in life am I not creating space? And how, if I'm not creating it, how can I create space? How can I take 5 minutes away from what I'm doing, disconnect with and connect with something else just to shake it off, and then re-engage with it? How do I always come back to it? Or can I hang out here for a few more seconds and let it go? Is this crowd too big for you? Or are you just panicking and you want to get away because that's what you do? Or can you just take 5 more seconds, 5 more minutes, and see how you're doing? Check in, find a way to get away from the crowd so no one's behind you or whatever, and just stay there and then slowly work your way back in, or decide that you have to go, but you're doing it in a calm, rational state. And so that's been a huge life lesson as well. And the final one is 2 stripes. I got 2 stripes. So I'm a 2-stripe white belt, and the stripes, they matter if you want them to matter. They are obviously a way to show how close you are to the next rank or that you're making progress. I think sometimes it can be done, for whatever reason the coach wants to give you, hey, thanks for showing up, or hey, you're getting better. They have their own reasons, but I feel personally that I have to give it a reason. I have to determine what I find valuable in them because they are just tape. And as a white belt, you could argue that they're not, I don't know. I don't even know if I want to say that. To me, they're all important, whether you're a brown belt or a white belt, but they're only important because of the meaning you give them. If you just, oh, well, it's just, I'm a white belt, and so tape doesn't really matter, that's a problem. And I'd ask you, where else are you doing that in your life? Where are you diminishing your accomplishments? Where are you trying to protect yourself from becoming too egoic or too prideful by diminishing things? It's by self-deprecating, by selling yourself short because you earned it. You go through life and things happen and you give it the meaning. The world will try, and they do try. I've had some people comment about the way I do life on social media, and it's just shocking. Just move on, right? Like if I don't agree with something, I can move on, but I can also reflect on it. And so when people talk about, oh, you got a piece of tape in your jiu-jitsu belt, whatever, you're a white belt still, I don't want to hear it. My first stripe was consistency. I was showing up in a way that I had never shown up in my life. That matters. That's not just tape. That's a signal that I've done something I've failed at in the past, and that is consistently show up for any sport. And I've done it, and it's not easy. So I will take that piece of tape, and it always will mean something to me because it's the first one I got because I did something I'd never done. Second piece of tape, I'm making progress because I'm halfway to blue belt, not time-wise, but stripe-wise. And it's a whole different, like why you get your blue belt is up to the coach too. And when I get my blue belt, I'm sure it'll have maybe a different meaning to me than it did to my coach for why he gave it to me. But the second stripe means I'm getting better. It means I'm making progress. My coach had said once that, it can be as simple as a no-stripe white belt puts his hands on the mats and gets Kimura. A two-stripe white belt now is aware that his hands can't be on the mat. It's very little fundamental things that you've shown that you're more aware of. So that progress, when I say that, doesn't mean, oh man, Eric's getting to be a handful. He's pretty good. Watch out. No, it means that I'm starting to do jiu-jitsu. Starting to get some of those simple fundamental things. You're aware of putting your body parts in certain positions and what the danger could be in that. And that to me is kind of that growth, getting better. Slowing down. Also, it was the second stripe for me is right about the time that I started learning how to slow down and not spaz or not improvise so much or burn myself out. And I still do, depending on the match, depending on how my asthma is doing. I still burn out, but I'm better at knowing what things will cost me and why they cost me versus being like, oh, it's just my cardio sucks. No, that might be part of it and you should keep training, but you're burning way too much energy for this one thing and you got to let it go and move on to the next thing. So that two-stripe white belt that I am, that's who I am becoming. And I think we'll see what happens when I get a third, and I'll reflect on each one, because they have to mean something to me and they have to mean something to you, and you get to define what that meaning is. That's all this life is how we react to the things that happen. That's what makes up who we are in this life story. I mean, that's every story ever written is how does the hero react to the adversity? How does the hero react to the inciting incident? How does the hero react to the setback, to the loss? This is what creates a heroic story. And I'm not trying to be bombastic. I'm trying to be very real, that when you train your body in a combat sport like jiu-jitsu, there's a lot more of that embodiment of the traditional hero that you can feel and you can go to and look at your life that way, because you're bringing in that warrior. As much as we have lover, king, and magician, from the Jungian archetypes, that warrior comes online when we get physical. And the hero is physical. The hero fights for what is right, what he or she believes in, does not shy away from a fight. And when I say fight, I don't mean going out to the bars and getting into fights. Maybe that's how you should look at it, is each stressor is a call to adventure, a new quest. I used to say the question you have is the quest that you're on. And you go and seek the information. You go learn. This is heroic because it's much easier to stay home and not go on that quest, because that quest is going to involve stress. So the quest for a stripe is never going to be one. A quest for a belt is never going to be one. But I am on a quest to learn and grow and continue to pull meaning out of life. And Jiu-Jitsu has just been, this first year of Jiu-Jitsu has been ripe with those lessons. And the takeaway after a year is the lessons and the connections. And realizing how much I need to continually move my mind and body to write that life story and reflect on the story I'm writing with that mind and body consistently. Because if I get too far off, if we get too far off one way or the other, it's a lot harder to course correct and get back on. But if we do, we pause, we pivot, and we pursue. We pause, we pivot, and pursue until we get on that path. I'm not interested in drastic, wild movements of life anymore because that's where hurt comes. That's where harm comes. Slow corrections, of course. Understanding why we're making that correction. And in Jiu-Jitsu, that's the game. You're in a situation, you're creating small angles, you're creating small spaces, you're creating small frames, micro movements to then go for the macro, or to put yourself in a position, because if you just flail for it, chances are you'll lose the whole thing and you'll be back in a same position or a worse one. It happens in life too. The more we flail around and improvise with no clue of what we're doing, we're just hoping it works out and we land in a better position, the more we stay in the same position. Pause, pivot, pursue, reflect, small changes. Go for it and do it. This is how we redirect our life and recraft a story we want to live. So until next time, journey well, my friends.